Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Soul Fighter event that's been going on over the last few months, and which is concluding. I actually believe this weekend is the last week that we are going to have the Soul Fighter event for. And I wanted to talk about this because I feel like Riot reviving big summer events with things like Spirit Blossom was a huge boon for the community, but they haven't always been. I think the Sentinels of Light event was a huge letdown in an innumerable number of ways, and in addition, the Star Guardian event I know a lot of players had issues with as well, and I feel like the Soul Fighter event was the first event that we've had over the last couple of years that's really sort of lived up to the hype that I think was not only a very well put together event, but also that the community has sort of come together to say, yes, this is what we want out of summer events. And so in today's video, I wanted to break down the ways in which Riot made the Soul Fighter event a phenomenal event and sort of compare that to the events that haven't been quite as good. First up, I want to talk about the number one thing that Riot needs to do to make an event feel like an event, and that is to have an alternate game mode for the duration of the event. This is like objectively the reason events feel special, more so than almost anything else, because alternate game modes give the players the ability to experience something fresh, and when themed, allow them to immerse themselves in the theming of the event. Consider game modes like Project Overcharge, Odyssey Extraction, or currently the Arena game mode. All of these are themed for the event that they were included with, and are very different from existing game modes. Even if we rewind back to the Spirit Blossom event, which is sort of the first event that we had where Riot started doing these annually, they had Nexus Blitz, which did exist previous to the event, but it did get a reskinned map, which was a huge advantage in helping it feel more thematically appropriate for the Spirit Blossom event. Meanwhile, if we look at some of the other events we've gotten throughout the years, Star Guardian got Ultimate Spellbook, which wasn't themed for Star Guardian and had the double disadvantage of being basically just Summoner's Rift with a marginally fun extra shtick that you'll probably play twice and get bored of. And Sentinels of Light had the exact same game mode as well, which at least was partially themed for the event, but it also just wasn't quite on par with the other discussed game modes. Arena, conversely, isn't perfectly themed for Soul Fighter, as in I could see it being introduced alongside another event because it's sort of generic in how it's run. The cameos are really the only thing that tie it specifically to the Soul Fighter skin line and the Soul Fighter event. But generally speaking, I feel like it is a good way to have an alternate game mode that players can play that's very different from Summoner's Rift and ARAM, that allows players to sort of feel like they're actually participating in the event itself, right? Soul Fighter is all about basically fighting games and the 1v1, 2v2. If you look at Project L is a 2v2, and as a result, it feels like when you're playing Arena, you feel immersed in that sort of fighting game aspect, which I'm a big fan of, and it's one of the reasons why the Soul Fighter event has stood out to me so much. And as a result, any future events that Riot wants to do require an alternate game mode, and preferably a new game mode. I know that Riot are a big fan of bringing back things like ARERF and Ultimate Spellbook and some of the other game modes, but making something that's specifically skinned for an event is always going to make it stand out more in your mind than anything else that Riot could do. Second up, one of the biggest innovations that Riot have added to events recently is the innovation of a meta game, or an in-client game, or a mini, whatever you want to call it, but that sort of in-client game that you get to play outside of League of Legends. I think that Soul Fighter has actually done the best job of any event that we've had with an alternate game mode inside the client, because it's actually themed for the event and that it's sort of a mini fighting game. Now, obviously, it's not as deep as a real fighting game would be, but I was pleasantly surprised with how much actual mechanical execution and knowing combos helped with the game mode. It really isn't the kind of game mode that you can just button mash through. Maybe you can on normal mode, but certainly by the time you reach expert mode, you kind of have to put a little bit of time into it, which is a really cool, nice touch. And the reason I think I like these metagames in general is because it has a very nice play loop. You play a game of League of Legends, you hop out and do your metagame progress, whether that's clicking through dialogue or beating the next boss, in the case of the Soul Fighter event, and then because you've made progress, now you go back into League of Legends to make more progress and progress the metagame further. I think that's a very nice little loop, especially if you're Riot Games, and I really think it's another way in which you can help the event feel more special in players' minds. I think that Spirit Blossom, which first introduced the visual novel, sort of got a free pass because I think the visual novel was brand new at the time and we were all very excited about it. And I think, admittedly, it does work well with the thematic. Conversely, I think that introducing the visual novel metagame alongside the Sentinels of Light event was really, really dumb. It didn't do anything that Riot wanted it to. It didn't actually allow you to tell the story in the way in which it needed to be told, and it felt like Riot were gating story content behind progress in this minigame, which isn't really what a lot of players wanted. So as a result, I think future events absolutely need more metagames, but more importantly, I think that Riot need to make sure that they're themed appropriately for the event and to innovate where necessary instead of rehashing old ideas. I think the visual novel thing works to a certain extent, but I think that you can only bring it back so many times in a row before the player base is just sick of it. Similarly, I think if they brought back the fighting minigame constantly, I would also get very bored of it over time. So definitely it's something that I want Riot to consider in the future, and if we get a future, a game mode or a minigame for a future event, it needs to be themed for that event. Next up is quality cosmetics are sort of a requirement for these events to be a success. Now, obviously, this is like always going to happen. Riot's events are, at the end of the day, just months-long advertisements for new skins. But they need to make sure that the skin lines they're marketing are going to work well for these kinds of events. Spirit Blossom and Soul Fighter were both brand new skin lines that we had zero preconceptions about, and as a result, they were all but impossible to get wrong, which is doubly true when you consider the quality of the splash art, the in-game models, and the VFX that all these skins have. Conversely, the Star Guardian event was just more Star Guardians, right? They didn't radically change up the format other than the Star Nemesis skins, and as a result, it didn't feel special. It didn't feel like you were excited about the skins. It just felt like Riot threw a dozen Star Guardian skins at you and said, well, get buying, and that's not particularly fun or interesting. And similarly, Sentinels of Light had a bunch of new skins, but had the major disadvantage of these skins being canonical appearances for those champions, which just opens up a host of criticisms that non-canon skins don't have to worry about. Things like, why is Olaf wearing an eye patch over a perfectly good eye? Why is Diana not using her Moonsilver Blade, which we know can hurt creatures of the Black Mist, in exchange for a random Sentinel weapon? Right, these sorts of things are questions that have to be answered if it's a canon skin, but don't have to be answered if it's not. And so I recommend that Riot stick to new thematics for summoner events as a result of this. I think it's a good way for them to guarantee that these new skins are going to be a solid hit for an event, as opposed to making something just that's building on to a previous skin line, because we're going to be going over those skins with a fine-tooth comb instead. Finally, I think that Riot need to be considering the quality of lore when they go into these events. A big draw of the events, naturally, is getting immersed in the theme, and having some degree of lore content is a big aspect of these. Soul Fighter and Spirit Blossom, of course, were brand new, so any lore content we got at all was going to be good lore content. We had no idea what the world of Spirit Blossom or what the world of Soul Fighter actually looked like, and as a result, it's really hard to mess it up. Conversely, Sentinels of Light and Star Guardians had issues with their own story. Sentinels of Light's issues have been well documented, even in a video that I've done. Star Guardian, meanwhile, I personally really liked it, but I do know that a lot of big diehard Star Guardian fans were unhappy with certain elements. Things like the focus on Akali and Kaisa, the Echo Sono romance, no inclusion of the previous Guardians, right? There were some things that they didn't like in particular, and so I feel like it makes sense to mention it here. So as a result, I think that Riot, again, should be focusing on new skin lines, but making sure that there's some degree of story building and world building going on in these events. I think it's one of the things that made the original Odyssey skin line event like a massive success in comparison to some of the other quote-unquote events we've had, like the project event we had last year, which wasn't really an event. There was no story content for it whatsoever. We don't know who these characters are, what they're doing in the world, what the event is actually about, right? We got no storytelling at all, and as a result, it can't help but be a letdown. And anyways, that's going to be it for me, guys. Those are the things that I think Riot should be focusing on for future events. I really think that they need to be guaranteeing, at the minimum, that they do have the alternate game mode and a minigame in client, especially something brand new, in order to make events feel special. But I think the other two aspects of quality skins and quality of lore need to be followed as well for Riot to really get off to the races on these events. But you guys let them know what you think the most important thing of a summer event is down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, especially if I missed something. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.